Hello, everyone. I'm Silvia Remolina. I am the new coordinator for the Demo.Reset project. I think you may know it. We are a project that is based here in Colombia, but we connect with 4 hubs on the world. That is Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. This project is made by the team of Extituto. Today, I will be your main facilitator for this session, and I have 2 colleagues from the Demo.Reset project that are in here with me. So please introduce yourselves, Karen and Melisa.
Hi everyone again, my name is Karen. I am participating in co-coordinating the Latin America Hub right now. It's great to see you all here again. We are very excited for this space. Welcome, and we hope that you enjoyed this meeting. So thank you. Oh, thank you, Sylvie.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to having here. Thank you for joining us. I am Melisa Velez, the co-coordinator for Sub-Saharan Africa in the Demo.Reset project. We are hoping that will be a very rich space to talk about this topic that is very interesting for all of us.
Thank you, Meli and Ka. Hi, everyone. Hi, Brigenda. Hello. So thank you all for being here. I'm just going to introduce you the agenda for this session. So we are going to start presenting, showing to you the publication. Then we are going to make an introduction of our panelists. Then we are going to go to the panel, questions and answers for them. And later on, you, the audience, can make some questions to the panel. Just a bit announcement. If you are joining us from a non-native speaking country, you can activate the subtitles and maybe the language translation through the session to better understand the session. You can also adjust the settings in here to see more than 50 people on the call. So you can see all the panels. So let's start. Meli, can you go to our webpage, please? Great. Okay. So, this is our webpage. It is www.Demo.Reset.org. Thank you, Ka. On the webpage, you will find now our publication. You may go to Get to Know, and you will find, great, our deliberation memoirs. This is our first deliberation memoir that is called Resetting Democracy. So just to show you a brief summary of this publication, our publication is conceived as a memoir of the Demo.Reset project. We are very pleased to work with 7 professionals who have experienced deliberation from different parts of the world and therefore from different angles. Some of them have been involved in these processes as creators of experiences, others as facilitators, others as spectators, and others have gotten involved thanks to this project. So where can you find it? Here we show you that you can find it on our webpage. You can visit www.Demo.Reset.org and go to our tools and resources section. Now, a context. We decide to make the publication about our process. We had two purposes. First, to connect the technical insights that we have found on our project's implementation during its first phase. That is to focus on the barriers faced by deliberation practitioners in creating effective and inclusive processes. On the other hand, we also wanted to deepen on who are the people behind the processes in the Global South of deliberation and citizen participation. And we also wanted to understand what regional context they have faced and they are still facing. So for this purpose, we invite some organizations that have been very active on the project. Thank you, Meli. So let me introduce you to our writers. So we have divided our chapters on steps because we imagine this practice as a journey that has no end and who is still in process. So for the step number 1, that is chapter number 1, today we will count with Sebastián Calderón. On this chapter, they also participate Sebastián, Viviana, and Adelaida. Although Viviana couldn't make it to the session, we thank a lot her work and her participation on making this process a lot easier for all of us. So let me just present to you Sebastián Calderón. He is lawyer and historian, experienced in international government consultancy. I can't see if Sebastián has his camera on.
I have it. I'm
Great.
here.
Hi, Sebas. So,
Hello.
an historian experienced in international government consultancy, citizen participation, and peace processes. He is skilled in building mobilization, deliberation, and citizen participation networks, as well as developing civic technologies for enhanced engagement. He is co-founder of Instituto de Política Abierta, and now Research and Development Manager at Innovation for Policy Foundation. Thank you, Sebas, for being here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sylvie, and thank you to all the great team of Demo.Reset for gathering us and inviting us to this important event. And really looking forward to the panel discussion. Really grateful for being invited here.
Well, now I can introduce to you to Evelyn Dan Epele. She is the writer of chapter number 2, Sub-Saharan Africa and the Paradox of Political Development. Evelyn is a multimedia journalist and development communication professional. She serves on the board of the Pan-African Strategic and Policy Research Group as Director of Global Communications and Digital Media, and as a resident communication fellow at the Center for the Study of Economies of Africa. Hi, Evelyn.
Hi, Sylvia. I'm so excited, as you can imagine. Thanks everyone who have made it here today. It's been such a long time coming. And that is very reflective of, how much effort has gone into this work. I'm very proud of us all. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for your leadership, and to the team at Demo.Reset, of course, for even initiating this project. I definitely enjoyed working on it, and I can't wait for everyone else to see it.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. So just to introduce the organizations that are also part of this stop of this chapter number 2, we counted with John Oluwafemi from Ad Hub Africa and with Samuel Kimu from Africa's Voices Foundation. Samuel will be joining us a little bit later on this call. So now let's go with our step number 3. So we found Sunil Tambe. He wrote the chapter Prospects of Deliberative Democracy in Southeast Asia. He is an independent journalist. He started his career in Marathwada, a lesser-known regional Marathi daily from Aurangabad, a district town in the state of Maharashtra, India. He was gradually moving to English newspaper with a brief stint in electronic media. As a journalist, he has traveled the length and breadth of India, covering politics, agriculture, and social issues. He won the Jagan Faris Award for investigative journalism, and he wrote one book, Marquez Chi Ghost. The book introduces Marathi readers to the life and work of Gabriel Garcia Marquez and his magical realism. Thank you, Sunil. Are you there, Sunil?
Your microphone.
Unmute.
You're mute, Sunil.
Okay. Now, so it is really great pleasure to meet Demo.Reset team again, and it's a wider team, and it was really a wonderful exposure to me, and particularly while interviewing Onsha and Liben from Thailand and Taiwan, and of course revisiting my own land, particularly Maharashtra, and of course in Northeast and others, where this deliberative democracies experiments are being carried out. Nice. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you, Sunil. So yes, as you were saying, the organizations that made part also of this stop number 3 are Pulang Kampang Foundation with Onusa Kanachat and Taiwan Reach Out Association for Democracy with Yupei Chen. So now let's go with stop number 4. We have Gabriela Sisniega. She wrote this chapter called Latin America and the Institutional Crisis. She is a Mexican architect and sociologist of the Global South. She is currently an inhabitant and participant of the landscape and territory of the state of Mexico. She is expert in research, design, and implementation of collective thinking methodologies in contributing to the care and strengthening of just, safe, and sustainable communities through observation, collaboration, exchange, and based on human and no human rights. So hi, Gabi.
Hola, Sylvie. Hi, everyone. I'm very, very happy to see you all again. And well, thank you all for this commitment always in creating spaces for political imagination and political inspiration. I had the honor of interviewing and writing about 2 deliberative practices in Latin America, one in Chihuahua, my native city in Mexico, and one in Fortaleza, Brazil. Both Silvia and Sofia were extremely generous with us. They shared a lot of their knowledge in form of experience, learning, personal perceptions. So I'm sure that their stories are not only deeply inspiring, but also very useful and resourceful. Please feel welcome to read. And I'm also looking forward to read everyone else's contributions. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Gabi. And thank you, Silvia, for being here also. So now let's go with chapter 5. So step 5 and 6. 5 is made by Katya Petrikevich. She wrote this chapter called Eastern Europe, Tangle between South and North. She focused on mainstream practices in public participation and community engagement as a co-founder of Participation Factory and Civic Board. She is also working towards this goal as a member of the PB Practitioner Board at People Powered and the mentor of the Rising Star membership program offered by People Powered. During her work, she supported the domestic and international offices of a civic tech company and provided expertise for the development of new technologies. She conducted research on current trends in tech and innovation for the EU Commission, trained young Western Africa leaders and activists at Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, and served as a jury member of the Prague civil society competition, Switch.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and thank you everyone for the hard work that went into this publication. And I'm really excited to see all of those experiences coming together, especially now when we're seeing kind of the rise of anti-democratic movements and anti-democratic regimes. I think it's incredibly important to keep those conversations going and to continue our exchange so that we can move together, learn from each other, and promote the best practices that we are familiar with. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Katya, for making part also of this project. I'm very excited today. So for the step number 6, we find also Sebastián, Viviana, and Adelaida. But today we have a little surprise. So last but not least, we would like to welcome Melisa Ross, who is joining us today on this panel. Although Melisa was not involved on the writing process, she has been a continuous contributor to the project. With her, we have been able to discuss approaches and better visions for deliberative democracy. We are happy to have you on this panel, Melisa. We can create a great conversation. So to introduce you, I'm telling everyone that Melisa is a postdoctoral researcher at SOCIUM Research Center on Inequality and co-lead of the Global Citizen Assemblies Network. She received her PhD from Humboldt University in Berlin, Germany in 2022 and was a research fellow at the Latino Project and the Democracies Project. She is currently part of the Global Solidarity Collaboratory, and her research spans contemporary Latin American politics, neoliberalism and post-neoliberalism, citizen participation, deliberation, and democratic innovations. especially at the regional and transnational level.
Thanks, Silvia, and thank everybody for inviting me to join today. I'm very excited about the conversation, and I've been already taking a look at the publication that you just shared, and I think there's a lot of very exciting stories here to be shared, and hopefully that will circulate further. But first, I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're going to be having today. Thanks.
Thank you, Melisa. So now let's start with our panel. Before we go in there, this is like the... we wanted to show you where you can find, or the stories you may find on the publication. So we made a focus on all the spaces, all the countries that were involved on this process. So you can see it in here on this map. Just to get a look on the importance of building like transnational reflections on deliberative democracy. So I'm very, very, very happy to see how did we expand based also on this map. So now, let's start with our panel. I'm going to give you a bit of context for all the people that is joining us today. So in this project, we have been interested in giving new perspective to citizen involvement in public affairs. We want to value and highlight the 4 regions of the world that we have sought innovative ways to solve the problems around the world. So this is why in this map you can see that these processes are shown on the Global South. And the Global South is a region that is still going through crisis of representation caused by problems of corruption, of lack of legitimacy, lack of trust in our leaders. And these factors have caused apathy and have disconnected citizens from public processes. But at the same time, some citizens, groups, some social organizations have proposed scenarios where there is still much to create and to connect with citizens. So let's start this first block of questions. For this first question, it goes to Sebastián and Melisa Ross. And this first question is, why do you think that is important to talk about deliberative democracy in the Global South today?
Well, thanks, Sylvie. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, because this question is the most relevant. Well, I don't want to say it's the most relevant, but at least it's one of the most relevant questions that we started with when we created Demo.Reset, right? I think it's part of talking about deliberative democracy in the Global South. It's talking about like the different positionalities that maybe the world have towards democracy, towards the development of democracy, but also towards the crisis of democracy. Like if we speak about, like there's a well-known, and just as Katya mentioned it, there's a well-known crisis of democracy, and there's a lot of corruption between institutions, lack of legitimacy, lack of belief, citizen belief in the government institutions. And I think that's one part, one stage that we all recognize about democracy nowadays. But when we refer to the Global South, to the territories of the Global South, there's another lens that we need to put into that crisis of democracy, right? Because a lot of places of the global south are places with a lot of inequalities, basic and structural inequalities. There are a lot of places that live in poor countries, in poor with poor ways of approaching democracy, and kind of the distance between the institutions and the citizens, I can say it's bigger in some of the places of the global south. So whenever we refer to that concept of the global south, and I know that it's a contested also terminology, it's a contested concept in the world. We might refer it as a global majority maybe, or there's a lot of new approaches to this concept. But we need to recognize that there is a certain positionality of some of the countries of the global south in terms of knowledge management, in terms of what we called, or the so-called development, and in terms of approaching democracy, in the advances of democracy, but also in the crisis of democracy. And I think that's one clear idea about that idea of global south, and why is it important to talk about deliberative democracy. Well, there's a wave of deliberative democracy and a lot of improvements of deliberative democracy theory on how to improve democratic capacities so that citizens could recover, or could start building a more confidence relationship with our institutions. But what I think of this is, when I think of this, it's also not only thinking on the other lenses that we need to consider on the global south, but also another element that is super important is that there are a lot of citizen engagement or citizen participation experiences in the global south that has not been recognized because of the single idea on how democracy works, right? And it's a Western idea. Much of it is an idea built on what we call the global north, on democracy, on how democracy works, and elections, and all of the information and the package of what we think of when we think of democracy. And it's kind of, how can we identify or recognize or name even some of the traditional democracy practices that have been living in the global south, and that are not part of the governance dialogue or governance conversation on how to build a good governance or how to build better democracy in the world. So I'll leave it there. Curious about what Melisa thinks of this, but yeah, I think it's one of the most important questions to address in this project.
Thanks, Seba, for introducing us to the topic, and I obviously absolutely agree with some of the points you've raised. It's important to talk about deliberative democracy because there's more to living democracies than, let's say, electoral institutions or traditional governance institutions. So there's that, and of course, there's the fact that what we may call the global south or the global majority faces dire problems, and many of them multidimensional. So like much of the world, I mean, the global north faces probably the same problems, but without the compound, harsh socioeconomic inequality, questions of violence, of internal conflict, and so on and so forth. So there's a level of complexity in the challenges to democratic and non-democratic societies that can definitely benefit from the perspective brought on by deliberative democracy. And I want to highlight here that deliberative democracy does not necessarily mean democratic regimes. You can have elements of deliberation in regimes that are not democratic, and it democratizes societies and democratizes institutions to have more deliberation, even under different regimes. So there's definitely that aspect. But I want to highlight actually something else. So as I mentioned before, I was scrolling through the book the last couple of hours because it was already online, and I was very curious about all these stories. And I think what stood out to me from the publication is that it really highlights, well, also two things. First, that it visibilizes and legitimizes stories of deliberation from across the world that wouldn't necessarily fall into that category at first sight. Issues of protection of LGBTQ rights, issues of activism, campaigning, organizing, community development. These are all questions that are historically associated with the field of participatory democracy, but wouldn't necessarily fall under the lens of deliberative democracy as a concept that has its roots in political theory and kind of academic thinking. No. So I really like that it connects these histories and these varied practices of deliberation to this kind of global field of inquiry and practice. But I also really like, and this is the second point that I wanted to raise about the publication, I really like that it shows that deliberation and deliberative democracy are not just kind of a collection of methods or practices or institutional designs, but it's more of an ethos, or at least it seems to be more of an ethos for the Global South, right? Like deliberation is more of a transversal perspective as to how to organize processes and communities in a way that's equal, that is understanding of difference, that leads to dialogue, that leads to better coexisting across difference. And I think this is a very relevant contribution that the Global South has to offer to conversations about deliberative democracy that have so far rather happened in the Global North, that deliberation is more than one-off processes, that it's a transversal perspective, maybe even a political horizon.
Thank you, Melisa and Sebas. It's nice to hear that there are not just like processes and practices, but there are transversal, positions and ethos, maybe, that people are not just making like for a project or a process, but to make better ways on solving the problems that they are facing day to day. So I'm going to connect this with our second question. This goes to Evelyn and Gabriela, and it is, why do you think we should look at practices of citizen participation or deliberative democracy created from the Global South?
Thanks, Sylvia. I'd want to sort of speak on that question, looking at the Sub-Saharan Africa chapter, which speaks to the paradox of political development. And just to explain that, to give context to that briefly, one of the things that I found from my research and from speaking with ACT Hub and Africa's Voices was that it didn't matter which countries in the region or even outside of the African region that we looked at, most of the challenges were homogeneous, which means that we had a trend in the region where, although governments assert themselves as democratic by means of, say, election that legitimizes their place in government, there isn't a clear practice of democracy in all of these countries, and the deliberative democracy frameworks and initiatives are as a response to the lack of these frameworks already from the government. And also, although the government assert themselves as democratic, the people do not feel or see the dividends of democracy, and as a result have had to sort of participate in governance. So it's more like a response to something that doesn't already exist. So to sort of respond to that, why we should look at citizen participation practices, I think that summarily I would say it's because it's a cry for help. It's more like a response, and we need to pay attention to that. I look at the US, for example, and its relationship with the African countries and how it helps Africa to sort of strengthen its democracy and all of that by paying attention to some of the needs, the needs that the African countries have. I would say that at a basic level, especially with the Sub-Saharan Africa region, there is a dire need to strengthen democracy. And that need is being met by the people. We see that whether that is in Nigeria or even let's use Kenya as an example, with the ongoing issues there, you see that the people are constantly standing up to do the things that the government is not already doing. And this is why it's important to pay attention to that, because it takes us directly to the people. I think, I don't know if she's online. Over to you, Sylvia.
I'm here. Thank you, Evelyn. So I'm going to give you the floor, Gabi, on this question too.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yes, I totally agree with my fellow panelists. And well, I think we should look at citizen participation practices created in this global South. And in my case, I will portray a little bit of the Latin American findings, learnings, ongoing barriers. So for us, citizen participation is still a privilege. It is not a given, it's not guaranteed practice in Latin America or in general, as we just listened. There are still many risks. So lack of regulation, simulation bias, legitimation of malpractice, corruption. But as we all know, the first and most important component of any process of deliberative democracy, and I'm maybe going back to the first question, is that the pedagogy component, right? So I also believe we can double the risks with the possibilities of learning, just beginning with the social cohesion that collective participation can foster. But beyond that, what we found in our conversation is that we can build capacities for collective planning, sharing, and caring. We can root the creative process of collective knowledge on their own communities, strengthen public trust, better understanding of the problem and thus their solutions. And on a deeper level, maybe even challenge the notions of problem, solution, benefit, distribution, access, public. I perceive that the communities of the global South are definitely important to look at, precisely because many given notions are challenged in the local contexts. So participation, yes, but is everyone participating? And how can we make that sure that everyone is represented and that everyone has a voice? And other notions like a problem from whom, solution from whom, benefit, who benefits, and how we distribute the benefits more equally. What does the private-public dichotomy really means in the local communities of the Global South? So of course, all of these questions bring ideas, very interesting conversations, and quite bright innovations in order to be possible even. And these innovations are great incentives of paying close attention at the house and the who's, and every ongoing way of reaching the deliberative spirit, which I think is building a collective informed thinking and deciding structure that understands better the dynamic, distributes better rights, responsibilities, resources, and benefits. So the innovations we're looking at in Latin America is make participation is like a scenario where participation is accessible for all. Participation is a public process. Participation is informed, is recognized as a job. Participation makes sense. Participation is not another problem to solve. Participation is representative, is not biased, does not hold any particular private interest, and it's possible and it's worth it. Both voices of the Latin American exercises are that are in this book express that the latter was achieved actually under exercises, which is a very good news. But of course, they also shared their context and the innovations they carried out for this to be possible. But both processes resulted in a number of well-received public recommendations, but still without institutional application, given the lack of legally binding accountability across administrations. This is one of the reasons why this chapter is titled Latin American and the Institutional Crisis. So bottom line is that we need to relearn or maybe remember in the most cases better ways of being collective. This definitely needs a sustained kind of participation we just talked about, and one that is able to challenge the establishment. Because the establishment is not going to challenge itself. So we definitely need more counterweights like this.
So thank you both. Thank you, Gabi and Evelyn. Just to complement precisely these both chapters, Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa, I think they bring a lot of reflections and doubts that arise on the work of the social organizations that you two have interviewed. And these are doubts that may arise also on the work of social organizations and of groups or collective of people who are committing on citizen participation and deliberation as a way of making some changes. So just to invite you to read both chapters too. Now, let's go to our final question from this first section. So this final question goes to Sunil and Katya. It is, how and why should we connect experiences from different contexts as Taiwan, Slovakia, and Brazil?
So far, shall I start? If Katya is there, Katya, will you please open the discussion? I'll talk about Taiwan.
Okay.
Go on, Katya. You first.
Oh, okay. Well, generally, there's already a lot that has been said about the context of the global majority, that there's quite a lot of similar problems or similar issues, and therefore intellectual exchange and exchange of best practices is definitely beneficial. But I think what's really oftentimes overlooked is that none of the democracies, even if, for example, some of the countries on our list are perceived as a better developed democracy, none of the democracies are stable, and none of the democracies are equally accessible, or democratic instruments are equally accessible to specific populations within a country. So even in a country that could be perceived as democratically developed as Taiwan, there could be some lagoons of inaccessibility of democratic practices. There could be some needs for inclusion. There could be some needs for improvement of processes. And in that case, practices from other countries can be adopted. I think what's also interesting is seeing how exchange of best practices can be going not just one way, but two ways. Interesting example could be, for example, Brazil and Slovakia. Slovakia has borrowed a participatory budgeting approach and adopted it to high school environment in a very interesting and unique way. where young students can actually lead the process themselves. So the school does provide them with the space, they do provide them with the money, yet the practice in itself and how it is being implemented and who's leading the process is completely different. So you can see that even though the practice was borrowed trait, it was then adopted by another to a given context. And this kind of evolvement and development is something that can be even brought back into Brazil, or it can be brought to other different countries. So having this exchange between places of different contexts can not only help to solve similar issues, but it can actually provide or improve existing solutions and methodologies that are already out there. And obviously, as it has already been said, there are similar issues connected to inclusion, accessibility. And what I liked from what other authors already said is that this environment has more potential for actually challenging the status quo or challenging our traditional notion of democracy because of how obviously insufficient existing democratic instruments are in our context. And I think exchanging between ourselves is really important. I also am very hopeful that our experiment in our part of the world can also be brought to other countries of the global north as an alternative to what has already been set up or what has already been working. And yeah, I think I'll pass the word to Sunil to continue elaborating on this question.
Okay, thanks, Katya. I think Taiwanese deliberative practices and democratic innovations offer valuable insights to the rest of the world. Firstly, Taiwan is, I think, exemplifies the rapid transition to the emergence of democracy, democratic polity. And it is actually quite rare in Asia, particularly Taiwan is surrounded by autocratic states like China, Vietnam, and on the other hand, most technocratic governance of Japan. And in this sphere, we should actually look at Taiwan as what. And secondly, Taiwan is also facing many challenges, just like other actors in the globe around the globe, such as the need for energy transition, problem of nuclear waste, then scarcity of resources, and emergence of unprecedented risk because of the climate change and emergent technology risk. I think in this, what actually, when I interviewed UP Chen, and she is working on, she is part of Taiwan Reach Out Association for Democracy, and they actually means this T Road they call it, that is Taiwan Reach Out Association for Democracy. They have come up with really interesting innovations like to civic engagement, social innovation, and democratic deepening by putting up into practice the democratic values of equity, inclusion, and empowerment. And the T Road has designed various facilitation techniques and methods to foster this genuine dialogue and organic collaboration among people of different backgrounds. I think it offers a lot of insights to all of us of and how we are going to actually, as Katya said, that we have to actually have these dialogues so that we can replicate, not replicate, I would say, but we can get inspiration from these models, and we would be able to actually execute or experiment in different countries.
Thank you a lot, Sunil and Katya. So just to close up this first section, I was just thinking on all your answers, and I think that it's important to highlight that even if there are transversal barriers between all the countries on the global south, they also have different challenges on their countries and on their regions specifically, and on their connections to the governments or the policymakers. But connecting experiences, connecting practices, connecting this context makes like motivations on the way of creating new scenarios. This brings like innovative or innovation in public processes. Even if we only focus, for example, in the way that we make the call for participants or the way in which we make like the dialogue, this become like a superior response on the process and the problems that they are facing. So that is really, really, really motivating about this publication. So let's go to our second Q&A. So I'm going to also connect like these answers and tell you a little bit of context about the creation of the publication. So as we've shown you, we established dialogues with 8 social organizations that have managed and promoted processes of deliberation and citizen participation. All the others have collected the challenges of the organizations, the lessons learned by them, and the social and political or regional contexts in which the organizations have wanted to promote these scenarios. So let's go with Katya and Evelyn. What role do you think social organizations in your region have played in the promotion of deliberative democracy?
Evelyn,
you can go. Get it.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm gonna over compliment, or maybe it's not possible to over compliment the social organizations existing in Central and Eastern Europe. But I feel like they have been a driving force, definitely, for bringing in the deliberative practices. Unfortunately, the government is not only not pushing it forward, but is oftentimes resistant. I think we're going to share this kind of challenge across our contexts. So in Central Eastern Europe, in Czech Republic, in Slovakia, and even to a bigger extent in Hungary, those organizations are really fighting for creating the space for participatory and deliberative methodologies and approaches and projects and processes. And they are the ones who are serving as educators, both to the general public on what is possible, on how to engage, on what's the value of deliberative democracy. And at the same time, the same organizations are being educators to the public sector and explaining to the public sector why they should be experimenting with the democratic practices, what's the benefit and what's the value. So the work is really large in terms of scope and scale. And obviously, it also comes hand in hand with advocacy, lobbying, and various efforts in being included in policymaking in order to make existing institutions and practices more open, more participatory, more deliberative. And I think when it comes to also bringing in the best practices in general, or inciting and starting the international exchange and dialogue, again, this is not something that the public institutions are doing, but the social organizations, whether those be NGOs that have connectivity with other nonprofits or non-governmental organizations internationally, or even activist movements. They are well connected across our region and with other regions as well. So as I said, it's really hard to overstate the amount of work that has been done. I know, for example, that such practices that seem to be standard in a lot of other countries and originating not in Central Eastern Europe, like participatory budgeting, like citizen assembly, that is something that has been brought in by the civil society organizations. In a lot of cases, it has been even funded by them when those first practices were implemented. And in certain cases, from what I know in Poland, sometimes or most of the times they're done even without the buy-in from the public officials. So it's kind of like done in parallel with existing democratic structures. So they're really, these organizations are creating the need and understanding and developing the best practices, laying the ground for deliberative democracy in our region. So I cannot thank them enough for this hard work, and I assume that it's very much similar across all of our countries.
Well, thanks so much for that. It seems to be, pretty much the same in sub-Saharan Africa, where it's like these organizations are pretty much the ones spearheading and even facilitating dialogue, whether that is organizing and engaging citizens in some kind of like policy engagement or public consultation. But one of the things that I've enjoyed, and to point out in response to the question on sort of the crucial role that these organizations play in promoting deliberative democracy practices, is seeing the innovative approaches that these organizations sort of use to help conversations that ordinarily wouldn't happen to happen. Whether that is participatory budgeting in countries like Nigeria, where we spoke to Act Hub, the work that they have been doing is like using their own resources and coming up with these projects and ideating projects based on the needs of people to respond directly to those needs, and how they involve citizens in solving the problems that they present, I think has been very interesting, and that's what stood out for me. Another thing is, and I saw this mostly when I spoke to Samuel for Africa's Voices in Kenya, is it goes beyond the traditional, budgeting processes and plannings and town hall meetings that we have here in Nigeria, for example. In the case of Kenya, they even go as far as leveraging technology, and whether that is getting public officials to a radio station where they can answer questions that's posed by the average citizen, and using the radio. And that's interesting that the radio that ordinarily is a tool for communication and information can also be used as a tool for advocacy and fostering democratic practices of getting people in government to the people to respond to questions. I think that that innovative participation mechanism for me has been something that stood out when I was engaging with stakeholders and learning more about how this works. My colleague has already spoken of the capacity building component of this. Act Hub especially did a lot of training programs in the local community in Oyo State where they're working, and that's like providing trainings for citizens, even at a basic level, helping people understand what the issues are. I find that, when we have situations where people go out to protest, setting stresses and strains, these organizations have also sort of stood as the buffers that prevented the fabric of society from tearing apart completely, whether that is helping local leaders and community groups to cope with the stresses and the strains through this training and empowerment initiatives. And it's interesting how they do it as well, because most of them have no funding and would have to also seek funding and support from the very same people that they're actually advocating for. So I've seen a lot of resilience, especially here in the region, where you have people dealing with other issues like poverty and dealing with other issues like lack of social amenities, and having to also struggle to give themselves the dividends of democracy that their governments are also not delivering. I think that I've found that level of multiple stress and strains, but still finding people respond to these issues in the midst of it all. I've seen a lot of resilience there. So I think that we can't overstate the role of social organizations that they play, but summarily, I think we can just say that it's a crucial role that they play to promote deliberative democracy in whether it's sub-Saharan Africa or all of the other regions where we looked at.
Thank you both for these answers. So nurture is definitely give us like a big perspective, like listening to you on every region that you have worked on. And I'm going to connect all these reflections with the second question that's aligns a bit, but more in general, about the collective action and the power that we can find on the collective action and on people like betting for making things together. So this second question goes to Melisa and Sunil. And it goes this way: how do you think that collective action promoted by social organizations is contributing to deliberative democracy processes?
Thanks, Silvia. Thanks for this question. I found it very thought-provoking, and so I'm going to answer on two parts. And I hope I don't speak for like forever, but I have much to say on this, I think. So the first part, how collective action and social organizations contribute to deliberative democracy, right? And I was thinking, well, it will depend a lot on who we consider social organizations. So I'm going to depart from the perspective that we're talking about conveners, participants, implementers, and advocates of deliberative democracy, right? And as both Gabriela and Evelyn mentioned just before, I think they're obviously key actors in very bad scenarios for democracies worldwide, but also in very good scenarios in democracies worldwide. And I'm going to explain why in a second. So especially if we look at the global majority, as we discussed previously, we see all of these kind of multi-level complex challenges to democracies as regimes and to democratic values, right? The degradation of public spheres, increasing polarization, decreasing trust, and then very material issues of poverty, inequality, violence, and so on and so forth. And so in these cases of very complex multi-level crisis, I think at least these processes, which can sometimes feel maybe small, maybe one-off, maybe a bit disconnected from regimes that maybe wouldn't even have them, they're still building democratic capacity, one community and one group at a time. And this is no minor deed, so to say. It is actual democracy work. It's maybe even kind of on the trenches of democratizing societies under regimes that maybe sometimes wouldn't really appreciate democratic institutions. So worst case scenario, social organizations are building democracy from the ground up. Best case scenario, under, let's say, democratic regimes, more or less stable with some degree of guaranteed civil, social rights, and so on and so forth, they're strengthening institutions, right? They're sometimes collaborating, sometimes challenging these established institutions and ways of doing policy and doing politics as well. But I want to highlight maybe one tension that hasn't come up yet, and it's the question of who these social organizations speak for and who they speak with, right? And I think here, this kind of internal democratization is also very important and a challenge for anybody working with deliberative democracy. It's very easy to do deliberative democracy to others. Doing it to ourselves is maybe the more difficult question. So I see some tensions in who these social organizations engage with, who are the communities they work with, and who are the communities they're not working with. And this is maybe an open question. And then kind of maybe mid-long-term reflection on who the constituents of these social organizations are, whether there's a representative claim going on and why. But then the second part of my answer, I want to invert the question actually and think about what deliberative democracy is contributing to social organizations, right? And this is a conversation we've been having with several members of Instituto for quite some time now. And I don't think there's a final answer, right? But I think it's very interesting that the global majority, many of these places, right? So I'm most familiar with the context of Latin America. I'm somewhat familiar with the context of some African countries. What we call deliberative traditions have super long histories, centuries of histories of these forms of coming together, of talking to each other under the grounds of equality, coming together, coming up with solutions together, right? So what I find very interesting is why the vocabulary of deliberative democracy, why this engagement with deliberative democracy, which is a very specific context that comes up from, political theory. What is this doing to these social organizations? Why pick this up now of all different moments in time? And I think I want to venture that in the past, it's been a question of connecting to institutions, right? There's other vocabularies, participatory democracy, community development, um, civic engagement, and so on and so forth, that has created these bridges for social organizations and popular demands to enter, to access political institutions. And so to grant political space to those demands coming from the ground up to groups that have maybe not been incorporated to institutional politics so far. And this is an open question, and I would love to hear maybe later in the discussion also from other practitioners in this call. What is this vocabulary and this language doing to your organizations now? Why pick it up? And I'm guessing that it has a strategic advantage of some kind, strategic in terms of building alliances across regions, across different places in the world, identifying shared barriers, common problems, maybe different strategies that work for others who are facing this kind of complex multi-level structural issues. But it also brings probably other advantages, right? Access to funding, to resources, to networks, and so on and so forth. And I think it's important to have this conversation in a transparent way as well. If deliberative democracy is a political horizon, then it's something that we need to be able to discuss in all these different levels. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. My take is on that is on Thailand and another on India. Because so far as the Taiwan, I have already spoken about Taiwan outreach this thing, routine. So far as when I have interviewed Ansha Kanchar, project director of Pulang Kampong Foundation in South Thailand, she said peace is intertwined with economic development because their foundation is working in South Thailand, which is comprised of 3 regions that are namely Patni, Yala, and Narathiwat. About 85% of that population over there is Muslim, and since 2004 they are facing, particularly the Thailand is facing the issue of insurgency and armed insurgency, and in which they are working. And according to Ansha Kanchar, it is actually the ethnic violence in these provinces can be partly attributed to economic backwardness. And therefore, Pulang Kampong Foundation actually had to overcome all those cultural as well as political barriers to instill confidence in the local Muslim population. It acted as a bridge between the government and local people. They established around 70 farmers' councils in Patni, Yala, and Narathiwat, along with public engagement of a minimum of 2,000 people across the villages, in different villages actually. This brought economic uplift as well as behavioral changes in the local population. The farmers' councils and their members got actively engaged with the government on the issues related to policies and schemes. And I think it's a really wonderful actually lesson for all of us. And so far as India, I would say that I would just cite one example, that is of Mendalekha, which is a small village in Gadchiroli district of Maharashtra in India. It is a region famous for its biodiversity of biodiverse dry deciduous forests and its tribal communities. The district has more than about 700,000 hectares forest land, and approximately 80%, total is 700,000 hectares, but approximately 80% of its land is under forest cover. Though this particular village, that is Mendalekha, they actually got the town hall meeting they organized, and they took major decisions that in our village we are the government. We vote for the government for the state or for this central government, but in our village we are the government. That's what major decision they took. And they talked about another major decisions were that all domestic requirements of the village would be made from the surrounding forest without paying any fee to the government. There were rules also. They set the rules also. Second decision was taken in that meeting in 1987 was that no outsider, whether governmental or non-governmental, would be allowed to carry out any forest activity without the permission of the town hall meeting, means village, in anywhere. Then no commercial exploitation of forest except for timber and minor forest produce is allowed. Villagers would regularly patrol the forests and they would regulate the amount of resources they could extract from the forest. Means how many timber should be extracted from the forest and etc. Then villagers, they also paid regular amount of, they would regulate the amount of resources they could. Then water and soil conservation efforts followed by the arrest of soil conservation, soil erosion. Then forest would not be set on fire and villagers would aid in fire extinguishing activities. And encroachment would not be allowed by anybody. So this village came up with this idea. And it is fantastic because village wanted to regulate its own forest. And obviously forest department, which is the biggest lord in the country, opposed this. But after a long struggle, finally, the government of India passed a legislation that empowered Gram Sabhas, that is the town hall meetings of the villages, and the Forest Rights Act. Today, the village gets revenue in millions from the minor forest produce, and other villages are also following this example, and they are also getting organized there. And thanks to this, because of this movement, the government of India actually made amendment in the constitution, and Gram Sabhas was made as the crucial pillar of the rural democracy. I think this is wonderful. This Mendalekha village doesn't have any kind of non-governmental organization, what we call it as NGO, but they came together, they actually fought with the government, and now this model is getting replicated in many other villages, not only in Maharashtra, but in other states as well. I think this is wonderful. This is the actually, I would say, the best example of deliberative democracy or participatory governance.
You're mute, Sylvie.
Sorry. Thank you, Sunil, for enlightening us on the context of Taiwan and India. I would like to invite you all to read this chapter 3 on Southeast Asia. And this context that Sunil just gave us definitely allow us to think about the organizations and the citizens using collective action to change laws and also to protect the environment. I just wanted also to reply to Melisa. It was delight on hearing these reflections on the language and how the language itself shapes like our practices and our work and the work of organizations as collectives that have emerged. And I was just thinking, like, sometimes it even becomes difficult to give legitimacy to social groups that are not formally constituted. And sometimes even if the scenarios of deliberation are created in processes such as social mobilizations, among others, the power to influence becomes diffuse. Just to not be like formally made, but it also opens the question, I don't know, if the strength and the power of collective action should be established only by social organizations, And that is why it is important to have this vision of how far we can go in promoting democracy. So just going to tell you all, we are going to make this last question, and then we can answer the questions from the public. So this last question goes to Sebastián and Gabriela. Is how we can look for innovative ways of linking strategic actors and or people who are not part of the organizations, but who are interested in participating in this type of processes.
All right, thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to say. I just want to highlight two ideas here around like working in inclusive ways, right? And to include different types of voices into deliberative processes or into participatory democracy processes. The first one, I think, and it's in terms of design. I think designing participatory processes need to take into account different types of outreach methods, right? There's a common idea that deliberative democracy has been driven by sortition as an outreach method that implies that basically we can make like a civic lottery between the people that are that are part of a specific problem, so that people not only the people that are maybe not politicized or are not involved in the different in the work of some institutions can participate into the really explore the contents, for example, of Demo.Reset, of a lot of initiatives like Democracy R&D, also the Governance Vocabularies Initiative. As there are a lot of efforts in the democratic innovation world that are trying to expand that idea only on civic lottery as the only outreach method. And it's in terms of design, there are a lot of experiences really important in order to understand how can we design or choose a specific outreach method that is relevant to the context, right? And this is all about, and I connect this to the first question, why is it important to talk about this in the Global South? Well, because it's important to acknowledge the contexts, the different contexts, and how they link between the barriers, for example, that they have and they face towards citizen participation. So I will say the first idea is it's a matter of designing and it's a matter of exploring different outreach methods. And the other one, the other idea that I want to highlight here is maybe making a wider concept or trying to look for a wider concept of on how are we speaking to the people and to the citizens about democracy, right? Because it's something that most of the times we've been developing like a jargon or like specific vocabulary between democracy or around democracy, and there's and we need to acknowledge that this is a vocabulary that we all speak and we all understand, but not may be the reality of all the people and of all the citizens involved in a deliberative democracy process. So I think, and I want to highlight especially the efforts of Adelaida Pardo in writing this book, because it was an attempt. Adelaida is not from this ecosystem of democratic innovations, but she's a filmmaker. And it was an effort of all the Demo.Reset team to bring someone that doesn't speak our common language or doesn't know our jargon, but instead it can try to capture the general ideas of what we're trying to do here in of what we were trying to do in Demo.Reset, and kind of translated into another more poetic, more artistic ways of seeing this process and seeing these approaches to innovations. So I think we need to keep exploring on those type of ideas. How do we explore artistic points of view about democracy? How do we explore other approaches to democratic innovations that are not only related to the same language that we all speak within our organizations? And this relates also to the question that Melisa was making as a provocation to us, right? Like how can we how are we how's the relation between organizations and deliberative democracy, and within all of these organizations and other ecosystems towards deliberative democracy. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
So basically, I was going to say the same, Sebas. Just kidding. But actually, my interviews, the interviews I had the opportunity to undertake, gave like punctual examples of what you just explained. So I'm just gonna put them there in the table. You can go for more details on the chapter of Latin America. But one thing that both organizations undertook, both in Brazil and in Mexico, was to engage in a very active recruitment of representative groups of people, of the communities that were involved, of course, not only for the deliberation process, so not only for the decision-making process, but a little bit like before that, they took like a very good part of the process or the dynamic to understand better the problem that they both were tackling. So one problem was waste management in Fortaleza, Brazil. The other problem was anti-corruption policies in Chihuahua, Mexico. So these both were very complex problems that were affecting very differently different people, of course, different groups of people. And so understanding this problem and engaging people, calling out for participants on better understanding this, every possible nuance of both problems seemed to be like one great incentive for participation. So what I perceived from both conversations was that people was actually very excited to be participating in these conversations because like one of the quotes of the chapter is, people love to participate if it's worth it. So I really celebrate that. I think that only by that we already have a successful exercise for sure. And also what they found was that people, citizens, were able to build a sort of political confidence. So not only on the technical point of view of the problem, but also like they at some point became confident enough to make decisions, like to be able to participate with this confidence, right? So I think both innovations or both learnings are very important to keep the participation and the engagement of several actors in place, like active. And yeah, also like the part that Sebas just mentioned, which is like the multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach to the problems. The language, of course, is a very important and like a very sensible part of the process, and maybe even I can easily imagine that every exercise actually builds new language for their own context. So this is also a learning or like an ongoing challenge that one of the both organizations mentioned. So one like overlooked part of the process is like the gathering of all of this learning that is like underground of an ongoing deliberative exercise. So of course we have like all this learning of the problem, all this learning of the actors of the community, and all this like learning never stops during this exercise. So gathering those learnings and then being able to share them, it's like a lot of work. So yeah, I think that that's a challenge that both organizations were able to tackle at some point, but they both wish that this could be like more like that had more focus, so we can actually, because they both think sharing this learning might be another like great incentive to keep yeah, like keep the participation up.
Thank you both. So
You.
clearly, like this emphasizes us that the deliberation process have important stages with which have been mapped, which have been studied, and the organizations that are betting for the deliberation processes, they also train themselves, or they innovate on these processes. So the lessons that each process gives us, it's a gain, because they are showing us like the barriers, the conflicts that they have faced on making these processes. And according to that, I think that precisely the contact between organizations also increases like our reach or our outreach. So now, just to end up and close this panel, I would like to open the floor to the audience. So those who wish to speak or to make some questions, please raise your hand, or you can make it on the chat, and we will give you the floor. You can make the questions either to one speaker, to one panelist, or to the whole panel. So go on, Bidan.
So an important contribution to creating a greater and democratic practices through our
Yeah, the is also breaking down for me. Sorry, Bidan, we can hear you very well. So we hear like the beginning of your sentence, but not the end. Do you want to ask or maybe make this reflection on the chat?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry. Does anyone else want to ask a question? Or maybe some reflection on the panel?
May I?
Go on, Sunil.
Yeah. No, I just want to share that after this Demo.Reset lab, then I think 2 years back, after returning from that our Demo.Reset lab workshop, I addressed 2 workshops, one in Mumbai and another one is in Pune. And there I experimented with plural voting or quadratic voting. And I think if we could develop this kind of app, I think it would be easier for us to reach out to the people at large. Because now everybody has a smartphone. If we could develop this app and that could be customized as per the different regions, that would be a wonderful idea. Because when I experimented with that quadratic voting, of course, it was a small workshop, one organized by Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, and another was by some organization in Pune. And both of them were quite interested and they were quite impressed by the results of the quadratic voting. And I said we can use it for even for municipal budget or state budget or some other decisions, and all that one has to vote it, and that would actually create a lot of awareness about deliberative democracy.
Thank you, Sunil. So just to give the audience a bit of context, so Sunil is also talking about apps that can be useful in facilitating virtual voting or virtual forums. I saw that Antara from Civis in India joined the call, but I think she left. But maybe I can connect you with Antara, Sunil, so you can talk to her about your insights on these processes, and you get to know the process that they have been developing on India too.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read what Bidan wrote us. This report needs to be widely disseminated. What else can be done in this case? Are we doing advocacy on this with the global media? I think it can have a positive impact. How much youth participation was in these initiatives? Is it possible to understand the picture of youth participation? And can it be highlighted in future publications? So this last one, I'm going to open the floor for the panel. I don't know if you want to answer this second question. How much youth participation was in these initiatives? And if it is possible to understand the picture of youth participation, maybe on your regions. Go on, Katya.
Thank you so much for the second question about the specifically youth participation in youth initiatives. I think there are two different ways how youth engagement or youth participation can be managed within the practices of deliberative democracy. The very first track is to make sure that young people are included in all of the standard processes. So you're not creating parallel projects, you're not creating parallel methodologies. You're just making sure that you're making existing ones accessible to young people. And for example, you can see that in lowering of the voting age or specific outreach to schools, youth communities, youth organizations to bring in young people to workshops or to bring young people to citizen assemblies, etc. So you're just making sure that every process has this kind of layer of youth participation. And for example, in Czech Republic, that's quite standard as of now. Whenever we're doing processes that are addressing or that are having the participation component, we're trying to include young people, including students of primary schools. So as young as it possibly can be done. And then when it comes to the second track, there are certain cases where purely youth engagement is sought after. So you're creating parallel structures or you're creating separate processes specifically for youth participation. As I already mentioned, in Slovakia and also in Hungary, and actually in my chapter or at my stop in the publication, I'm exploring the school participatory budgeting method. So you see that this is the method that has been originated within a different context, but brought into the youth engagement, and now it's purely done for young people and sometimes even by the young people. And I think I'll leave it at that. Maybe I can just note that the best approach, again, as to everything else, is to make sure you're not bringing participation to young people in a form that's seen as a top-down and they don't really have a say in how to manage it. It's always good to have young people as co-owners, leaders, or co-designers of those processes, because otherwise we're basing our participation structures on the expectations of what young people might want or might need. And this is oftentimes not the case. So including them in the process as early on as possible, while also providing them with exclusive space where they can talk between themselves, but also a space within the bigger conversation. That's kind of the best practices when it comes to youth participation and engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Katya. I think a lot of organizations working in Demo.Reset and on citizen participation and on youth participation can learn a lot of the work that you have been doing also. So it's very exciting to connect with them. So just for closing up, I just want to read what Vidat was trying to say to us. And then we are going to share with you a surprise that we have prepared from the team to the writers and the public. So first, Vidat. I am participating from Bangladesh. I am the co-founder and managing director of Prabha Aurora. I went through the entire publication during the program. It is very important publication, and the discussion of the publication is very insightful. We are very encouraged and inspired that the Demo.Reset projects have done in the first year. There is much to be learned from the innovative ways that have been used and the ways in which projects have been implemented involving people, communities, and men's. Many can be replicated in our country context. At the same time, we feel proud to be associated with this platform. We feel proud to have the opportunity to participate in Demo.Reset from Bangladesh. We especially want to express our sincere gratitude to CEE for motivating us and providing us the opportunity. Thank you so much, Vidat. It's nice to hear you and to read all your wishes. And I see that Andre is already very, very, very excited about this. So let's go to our last part. Great, thank you. So we made a collage. During the development of this publication, we asked the authors and the participating organizations a question that we think it is important to highlight in here. Because you will find it through the publication and you will be able to approach like the journeys of deliberation. This question was, what does deliberative democracy looks like from your window? So as a gift to the work done by the authors, we make this collage with some of those images. And here you can see the creation. This collage will continue to expand. We'll continue to have new windows, new images, people, and processes. And that is why we are happy to continue counting on you on all these sessions. And we want you to be part of the experiences too. So just to close up, we invite you to read the publication. On our webpage, we have been sending it on the chat. You can find it on our website. And I want to inform you that we will hold 2 socialization sessions with the authors and with the organizations that from whom we got inspiration. The idea of these sessions is to deepen the knowledge from each region. This session will also focus on making cross-regional dialogues on the hubs and understanding the differences and similarities in the practices. So keep an eye on Instituto's social media. Later on, I will show it to you. On Instituto's social media, on the WhatsApp groups of the project, we will share the information about this session. And just to give the floor to Karen and Meli, they have also made a playlist inspired by the different regions of Demo.Reset. And this is a gift from the team of Demo.Reset to you guys. So you can listen to our playlist also.
Yes, Sylvie, in past meetings, we try to ask to our teams of deliberative practice in each hubs for some sounds or songs that they like and represent their countries or their regions. So you will find some of those songs in this playlist. Is diverse. We try to make it diverse and yes, multicultural. Maybe you want to add something?
Not really. Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing your ideas with us. We would like to listen to people who attend this book presentation. So we are going to give also the floor to the people who wish to participate. In the chat, we put the order, and we ask you to please raise your hand in the meet to assign your turn to intervene again. Thank you so much for joining us. And yes.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So we will continue in dialogues. Oh, thank you so much for being part of this launching and of this publication. Would you like to take a picture from all? Meli, could you stop presenting? Great. So everyone, if you want to turn your camera on. Yay. It's nice to see you guys. So smile, please smile. Yay, great. So have a good day and remain attentive to our social media and the group chats of Demo.Reset.
Thank you all.
Bye, thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Sylvia.
Thank
and
you.
Sebastián.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.